The rain had just started when Daniel Brooks pushed open the glass door of the quiet downtown cafe holding his daughter's tiny hand. His jacket was damp, his shoes worn, and his mind full of worries about rent bills and the future he was trying to build for the little girl beside him. Emma looked up at him with bright, hopeful eyes, the kind of eyes that made him believe somehow everything would be okay even when life said otherwise. They sat in the corner where the warm yellow light softened the gray afternoon outside. Daniel ordered one hot chocolate and quietly asked the waiter to bring an extra cup so Emma could feel like it was her own drink even though he could barely afford it. Emma giggled, wrapping both hands around the warm mug while Daniel watched her with a tired smile. She was only 5 years old, but she had already seen more struggle than many people twice her age. Across the cafe, a black luxury car stopped by the curb and a woman stepped out under a sleek umbrella. Her presence shifted the air of the room without her saying a word. She was tall, confident, and dressed in simple elegance that hinted at immense wealth. Her name was Victoria Hale, one of the youngest self-made billionaires in the city, the kind of woman who owned companies, skyscrapers, and headlines, but somehow still carried a quiet loneliness behind her composed expression. Victoria entered the cafe, scanning the room with thoughtful eyes. She had just finished a brutal meeting with lawyers and advisors. Her family company was on the brink of a corporate takeover battle that could destroy everything her late father had built. The solution her advisors suggested sounded ridiculous, even cruel. They told her the board trusted family values and stability more than anything else, and if she appeared to be settling down, it would strengthen her public image and protect the company from hostile investors. In simple words, they told her she needed a husband immediately. The idea felt absurd, but time was running out. The board vote would happen in less than 48 hours and the pressure was unbearable. Victoria had spent her entire life building success, yet in that moment she felt trapped by a system that judged strength differently when it came from a woman. As she waited for her coffee, her eyes drifted across the room and stopped on Daniel and Emma. Emma was laughing about something small, maybe the way marshmallows floated in her drink. Daniel listened with a patience that felt rare in a world that always seemed rushed, tired, and distracted. Victoria watched them longer than she expected. Something about the quiet devotion in Daniel's posture caught her attention. He looked exhausted yet completely present. Every time Emma spoke, he leaned closer as if her words were the most important thing in the world. Moments later, Emma accidentally knocked over the cup. The chocolate spilled across the table. Daniel immediately grabbed napkins, apologizing to the staff while comforting Emma at the same time. "It is okay, sweetheart, it is just a drink," he said softly. "We can clean it together." Emma looked up with worried eyes, but Daniel smiled in a way that erased her fear. Victoria felt something strange twist inside her chest, a memory of what warmth used to look like before business meetings, contracts, and endless responsibilities replaced the simple parts of life. Before she could stop herself, she walked toward their table. Daniel looked up surprised as the elegant stranger stopped beside them. Victoria hesitated for a second, then said something that sounded unbelievable even to her own ears. "I need a husband tomorrow." Daniel blinked, certain he had heard wrong. Emma stared at the woman with wide, curious eyes. Victoria continued speaking calmly, though her voice carried the weight of desperation beneath its polished tone. "I know how this sounds, but I am serious. There is a legal matter and I need to be married before tomorrow afternoon." Daniel stared at her, trying to process the sentence. The rain tapping against the windows filled the silence between them. Emma tugged gently on his sleeve. "Daddy, what does she mean?" Daniel rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly, then looked back at Victoria. "You are asking a stranger to marry you?" Victoria nodded once. "Yes." Daniel studied her face, trying to understand if this was a joke, but her expression remained serious, almost painfully honest. Then he asked the question that made Victoria pause longer than she expected. "That mean we will live together?" The innocence in his voice was not sarcasm, it was genuine concern, as if he was trying to understand how such a strange arrangement would affect his daughter. Victoria glanced at Emma, whose small fingers were still wrapped around the warm mug. Something in that moment shifted inside her carefully controlled world. She had approached the table thinking only about business strategy, but suddenly the situation felt human, real, complicated. She pulled out a chair and sat down across from them. "Let me explain," she said quietly. Victoria told him about the board vote, the corporate pressure, and the strange legal loophole that required her to appear settled and stable. She explained that the marriage could be temporary, strictly formal, and that she would ensure Daniel and Emma were financially secure no matter what happened. Daniel listened carefully, but his expression remained thoughtful, not impressed by wealth or promises. Finally, he said something Victoria had not heard from anyone in years. "Money is not the problem." Victoria raised an Eyebrow then what is Daniel looked at Emma who was now quietly drawing shapes on the table with her finger. I have spent 5 years trying to give her a life that feels safe, he said slowly. If we do something like this I need to know it will not confuse her or hurt her. Victoria was silent for a long moment. No advisor had prepared her for that question. For the first time in years she answered honestly instead of strategically. I do not want to hurt her, she said softly. Emma suddenly looked up at Victoria with curiosity. Are you lonely? The question was so direct that Victoria almost laughed, but instead she felt her throat tighten. Yes, she whispered before she could stop herself. Emma nodded as if she understood something adults often complicated. My dad was lonely too after mommy went to heaven, she said, but now we have each other. Daniel looked down, gently brushing Emma's hair from her face. Victoria felt an unexpected warmth spread through her chest. Maybe this strange, desperate plan was not just about business after all. The rain outside grew heavier as the three of them sat together, strangers connected by a conversation that none of them had planned. Finally Daniel leaned back and exhaled slowly. So you need a husband tomorrow? Victoria nodded. Daniel looked at Emma again, then back at Victoria. And you are okay if that husband comes with a 5-year-old daughter who asks a lot of questions? For the first time that day Victoria smiled, a real smile, not the polished one she used in boardrooms. I think I might need that more than anything. Emma clapped her hands happily as if a great mystery had just been solved. Daniel chuckled, shaking his head. Well, if we are doing this there is one rule. Victoria tilted her head. What rule? Daniel smiled softly. No matter how fake the marriage is, kindness has to be real. Victoria looked at him quietly, realizing that those words might change her life more than any business decision ever could. The next morning the city woke up to an unexpected headline. Billionaire CEO Victoria Hale had quietly married a single father named Daniel Brooks. The media speculated endlessly about the mysterious man who appeared suddenly in her life, but none of them knew the truth about the rainy afternoon in a small cafe where a lonely billionaire and a devoted father decided to take a chance on something completely unpredictable. What none of them understood was that the strangest part of the story was not the marriage, it was the beginning of a family neither of them knew they needed. And sometimes the most powerful changes in life begin with a question asked by someone brave enough to believe that kindness still matters. The news spread across the city faster than either Daniel or Victoria expected. By noon, every financial website, gossip column, and social media page was buzzing with the same shocking headline: Billionaire CEO Victoria Hale secretly marries unknown single father Daniel Brooks. Reporters speculated endlessly. Some said it was a romantic whirlwind, others called it a clever business move, but none of them knew the quiet truth that began in a rainy cafe with a small girl holding a cup of hot chocolate. Daniel stood near the tall windows of Victoria's penthouse apartment later that evening, looking down at the glowing city streets far below. He had never seen a home like this before. The space felt enormous: polished marble floors, wide glass walls, elegant furniture that looked more like art than something people actually used. Emma wandered slowly across the living room, touching everything with gentle curiosity, her small footsteps echoing softly through the massive space. Daddy, this house is bigger than the school, she whispered. Daniel laughed, quietly rubbing the back of his neck, still unsure how his life had turned upside down in less than 24 hours. Victoria stood across the room watching them. She was used to powerful executives, billion-dollar deals, and high-pressure negotiations, yet somehow the sight of a tired single father and his curious daughter inside her perfect, luxurious penthouse made her feel more nervous than any board meeting ever had. Emma suddenly ran toward the tall window, staring at the city lights with excitement. Look, Daddy, the buildings look like stars. Daniel walked over, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. Careful, sweetheart. Victoria stepped closer, hesitating for a moment before speaking. Emma, would you like to see your room? Emma turned immediately, her eyes lighting up with excitement. I have a room here. Victoria nodded gently. Of course. She led them down the quiet hallway and opened a door, revealing a warm, bright bedroom filled with soft colors, bookshelves, and a small balcony overlooking the river. Victoria had asked her staff to prepare it quickly that morning, but now watching Emma's reaction made the effort feel strangely important. Emma walked slowly into the room, her eyes wide with wonder. This is mine. Victoria nodded. If you like it. Emma ran across the soft carpet, then turned and hugged Daniel tightly. Daddy, we live here now. Daniel smiled, but his heart carried a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. Victoria stood quietly in the doorway, Watching them, something about the moment felt unfamiliar yet comforting, like stepping into a life she had forgotten was possible. Later that night, after Emma finally fell asleep, Daniel found Victoria standing alone on the balcony overlooking the dark river. The cool night air moved gently through the city lights below them. He stepped beside her, resting his arms on the railing. "You look like someone carrying the whole world on your shoulders," he said calmly. Victoria let out a quiet breath. "In some ways I am." Daniel glanced at her. "The board vote?" She nodded. "Tomorrow afternoon." Daniel studied the distant skyline. "And this marriage helps it, should?" she replied, though her voice held uncertainty. "The board respects stability, family tradition. Appearances matter more than truth in their world." Daniel looked back toward the hallway where Emma was sleeping. "Well, we certainly surprised them." Victoria allowed herself a small smile. "We did." For a moment they stood in silence, the city humming far below. Then Victoria spoke more quietly than before. "Daniel, why did you say yes?" He shrugged slightly. "Emma asked if you were lonely." Victoria looked at him surprised, and Daniel smiled faintly. "I know what that feels like." Victoria lowered her gaze, thinking about the long empty years spent chasing success while ignoring everything else. "Do you regret it already?" she asked softly. Daniel shook his head. "No, but I do not want Emma to feel like she is part of a business deal." Victoria turned toward him, her expression serious. "She is not." Daniel studied her face, searching for sincerity, and he found it. "Then we will figure this out together," he said. The next morning the Hale Corporation headquarters buzzed with tension. Executives whispered, reporters waited outside, and the board members gathered in the towering glass conference room ready to decide the future of the company. Victoria entered the building with Daniel walking beside her. Emma held his hand, swinging gently between them, completely unaware that the fate of a billion-dollar empire depended partly on her presence. Employees stopped and stared as they passed inside the conference room. The board members watched carefully as Victoria took her seat. Daniel and Emma sat quietly behind her. One of the older board members leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. "Miss Hale, we were not informed about this sudden marriage." Victoria remained calm. "It was a personal decision." The man glanced briefly at Daniel. "Mr. Brooks, what exactly do you do?" Daniel answered honestly, "Right now I am a mechanic looking for steady work." Several board members exchanged skeptical looks. Another director spoke sharply, "You expect us to believe this marriage has nothing to do with the company situation?" Victoria's voice remained steady. "Believe whatever you wish. The marriage is legal, and my personal life should not determine the company's leadership." The room filled with tension. Emma quietly leaned toward Daniel, whispering something that made him smile. One of the directors noticed and frowned. "This is a serious meeting, Mr. Brooks." Daniel nodded politely. "Yes, sir, it is." The man leaned back, crossing his arms, clearly unconvinced. But before the debate could continue, Emma raised her small hand as if she were in school. "Excuse." Meth room went silent as every executive turned toward the small girl. Victoria blinked, surprised. "Emma, what is it?" Emma looked around at the serious faces with innocent confusion. "Why is everyone angry?" No one answered. Emma continued softly, "Daddy says when people are angry it usually means they are scared about something." A few board members shifted uncomfortably. Emma looked at Victoria, then back at the directors. "My dad married her because she looked lonely yesterday," she said simply. The silence that followed felt heavier than any argument. One of the oldest board members slowly leaned forward, studying Victoria and Daniel carefully. Then he spoke quietly, "Sometimes the strongest leaders are not the ones who appear perfect, but the ones who allow real life to exist beside power." Several others nodded thoughtfully. Within an hour the vote was finished. Victoria Hale remained the CEO of her father's company. As the board members left the room, one of them paused beside Daniel. "You surprised us, Mr. Brooks?" Daniel shrugged lightly. "I just answered a question." Later that evening the three of them walked along the quiet river near the penthouse. The city lights reflected softly across the water. Emma skipped ahead, chasing the glowing reflections. Victoria walked beside Daniel, feeling a strange peace settle inside her chest. "You saved my company today," she said quietly. Daniel shook his head. "No, your daughter did." Victoria smiled, watching Emma laugh as the wind moved her hair. "Maybe this arrangement was never meant to be temporary after all, because sometimes life does not bring people together through perfect plans or careful strategies. Sometimes it happens through simple kindness." A rainy afternoon and a question that changes everything. And as the three of them walked along the glowing river, Victoria realized something that no business victory had ever taught her before. The greatest wealth in life is not measured by power or money. It is measured by the people who choose to walk beside you when the world becomes uncertain. And for the first time in many years, Victoria Hale no longer felt alone. The days after the board meeting felt strangely calm, as if the storm that had surrounded Victoria's life for years had suddenly paused to breathe. The city continued moving with its usual noise and ambition, but inside the tall glass walls of the penthouse something quieter and more meaningful had begun to grow. Emma quickly filled the silent spaces that had once defined Victoria's home. Her laughter echoed through rooms that used to feel like empty galleries she asked endless questions about everything: the paintings on the walls, the tall buildings outside the window, the strange machines in Victoria's home office, and even the quiet piano that had not been touched in years. Victoria found herself answering patiently, something she rarely did with executives or reporters. One evening Emma wandered toward the piano, running her small fingers gently across the keys, creating uneven but cheerful sounds. "Daddy, can you play?" she asked. Daniel laughed, shaking his head. "I only know how to fix engines." "Sweetheart, not pianos." Emma looked at Victoria. "Then what about you?" Victoria hesitated for a moment before sitting slowly at the bench. Her fingers hovered above the keys as if they were remembering something from a distant past. When she finally pressed the first notes, a soft melody filled the room, simple and emotional. Daniel leaned quietly against the wall, listening, while Emma sat cross-legged on the floor, completely mesmerized. When the song ended, Emma clapped excitedly. "You are good." Victoria smiled shyly, something that would have shocked the entire corporate world if they could see her in that moment. "My mother taught me when I was young," she said softly, "but I stopped playing a long time ago." "Why?" Emma asked. Victoria looked down at the piano keys, thinking about endless meetings, deadlines, expectations, and the pressure that slowly replaced everything else. "Life got busy." Emma tilted her head, thinking carefully. "Daddy says when life gets busy we should still keep the things that make our hearts feel warm." Daniel chuckled from across the room. "I might have said something like that." Victoria looked at both of them, realizing how different their lives had been before this strange marriage began. Her world had been full of success yet empty of warmth. Theirs had been full of struggle yet rich with love. Weeks passed and something unexpected started happening. The arrangement that began as a desperate solution slowly began feeling real. Daniel found work managing maintenance for one of Victoria's company buildings, something he enjoyed because it kept him active and allowed him to return home early enough to spend time with Emma. Emma started school nearby, quickly becoming known for her bright smile and curious questions, and Victoria slowly discovered that coming home to people waiting for her felt better than any victory in the boardroom. But life rarely allows happiness without testing it. One evening Victoria returned home later than usual, her face tense. Daniel noticed immediately as she stepped into the living room. "Bad day?" he asked gently. Victoria sighed, placing her bag down. "The investors are pushing again. Some of them believe the marriage was only a public relations move. They are looking for any excuse to challenge my leadership." Daniel leaned back in the chair, watching her carefully. "And they think I am that excuse?" Victoria hesitated before nodding. "Some of them do." Emma looked up from the floor where she was building a small puzzle. "Why?" Victoria knelt beside her, choosing her words carefully. "Some people think a leader should only be around other powerful people." Emma frowned, thinking hard about that. "But Daddy is powerful," she said confidently. Daniel nearly laughed. "Emma, sweetheart, I fix pipes and engines." Emma shook her head stubbornly. "No, Daddy, you help people and you never give up even when things are hard." "That is powerful." Victoria felt something tighten in her chest as she watched the father and daughter in boardrooms. Power meant influence, money, control, but Emma's definition felt far more honest. Later that night Victoria stood alone on the balcony again, looking across the glowing city, the same place where she once felt trapped by responsibility. Daniel joined her quietly after Emma fell asleep. "You are thinking too much," he said calmly. Victoria sighed. "Maybe they are right. Maybe bringing you into this world of business problems was unfair." Daniel leaned on the railing beside her. "Victoria, look at me." She turned slowly. "I married you to help you solve a problem, but staying was my choice," he said. Victoria studied his face, surprised. "Why stay?" Daniel smiled gently. "Because Emma laughs more now, and because when you walk through the door every evening you look less tired than the day before." Victoria felt her eyes sting slightly, something she had not allowed herself to feel in years. "You make this place feel like a home," Daniel continued. For the first time Victoria realized something important: the marriage that started as an act of strategy had quietly become something far more meaningful. The next morning the investors called another meeting, determined to question Victoria's leadership once again. This time, however, Victoria entered the conference room with calm confidence. Daniel and Emma waited outside in the lobby. Inside the meeting, one of the senior investors spoke sharply. "Miss Hale, your personal decisions continue to create instability. We need assurance that the leadership of this company remains strong." Victoria listened patiently, then responded with quiet strength. "Strength is not measured By isolation, she said, it is measured by the courage to build something meaningful even when others doubted. Another investor asked coldly, and this marriage is meaningful? Victoria thought about the rainy cafe, Emma's laughter, Daniel's steady kindness, and the warmth that had slowly returned to her life. Yes, she answered firmly. Very much. The meeting ended differently than the investors expected because Victoria spoke not just as a CEO but as someone who had rediscovered balance, purpose, and humanity. When she walked out of the building, Daniel and Emma were waiting near the entrance. Emma ran forward immediately. Did you win? Victoria smiled, lifting her gently into her arms. Yes, we did. Emma wrapped her small arms around Victoria's neck happily. Daniel watched them with quiet pride as they walked home together through the bright afternoon streets. Victoria realized the truth that had slowly unfolded since that rainy afternoon in the cafe. She had once believed she needed a husband to protect her company, but what she truly needed was something far more powerful, a family, not one built by contracts or pressure but one built by kindness, patience, and the courage of three people who chose to care for each other when life brought them together unexpectedly. And sometimes the greatest stories are not about wealth or success, they are about ordinary hearts finding each other in extraordinary moments. Because the day a lonely billionaire said she needed a husband, tomorrow she unknowingly began the journey toward something she had been searching for her entire life, a place where she was not just a leader, not just a billionaire, but simply someone who finally belonged.